Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's meeting of the Climate Emergency and Sustainable Scrutiny Panel. I'd like to welcome you all. Just to make you aware that this meeting is being webcast, so if everybody can please turn their phones to silent, that would be lovely. There's quite a few new faces in the room this afternoon, so councillors and officers, can I go around the room and ask you to introduce yourself? So I'll start with Councillor May. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor May. I represent Whitchurch Village and Pensford. That's not the official name, but that's the two areas. I'm a Conservative councillor.
My name is Councillor Grant Johnson. I'm a Labour member and represent Poulton.
Councillor Rob Appleyard, the good-looking one, substituting for one of our members.
Yeah, hello, I'm Ruth Malloy. I'm one of the Western councillors, and I think I may be the only Lib Dem who's actually permanently on this panel today.
Hello, I'm Chris Major. I'm Director of Place Management for the Council.
Hello everybody, I'm Amanda Rigby. I'm not a member of this panel. I am here as Cabinet Member for Transport.
Hello everyone, I'm Hal McPhee from Kensham East.
Hello, I'm Duncan Hounsell, Councillor for Salford Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Dr. Kumar from Bartwick.
Hi, I'm Councillor Sarah Moore, Councillor for Twerton Ward.
Good afternoon, I'm Catherine Bryan, I'm the Clean Air Zone Manager for the Council.
I'm Claire Gray, I'm here with the Clean Air Zone team as well.
I'm John Biggins, the Operations Manager on the Clean Air Zone team.
I'm Jack Stacey and I'm the Senior Officer for the Clean Air Zone team.
Kate Hobson, I'm the Waste Programme Manager for the Pixash Recycling Project and other related waste projects, basically.
Hi, I'm Linda Dean. I'm Head of Service for City and Town Centre Management.
Thank you. So I'm just going to pass you over to Michaela, who's going to do the emergency evacuation procedure and then apologies in absence and substitutions.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by one of the designated exits and proceed to the named assembly point. The designated exits are signposted. Arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people. Apologies for absence. We've had apologies from Councillor Lisa O'Brien, who's been substituted by Councillor Paul May. Apologies from Councillor Shelley Bromley, who's been substituted by Councillor Duncan Hounsell. Apologies from Councillor Paul Crossley, who's been substituted by Councillor Sarah Moore. Apologies from Councillor Ryan Wills, who's been substituted by Councillor Hal McPhee. And apologies from Councillor Joel Hurst, who's been substituted by Councillor Rob Appleyard.
Thank you, Michaela. So does any member have a declaration of interest? It looks like a no. Thank you. So urgent business agreed by the Chair. There is none. So we have registered 3 public speakers, but I believe there's just 2 here today. So may I ask Sylvia Sinclair to make a statement? Thank you.
Thank you for having me. In July 2020, this Council declared a climate and ecological emergency. In a few weeks' time, the Council will commence a process to commercialise the High Common, which will potentially breach this declaration and undermine the Council's commitment to tackle the climate emergency. Since golf ceased 2 years ago, this iconic green space in the heart of Bath has been free of toxic chemicals and mains water irrigation, and the park's wildlife and habitats have flourished in their natural state. At a Cabinet meeting in early 2021, the Council listed 6 toxic chemicals used on the High Common to maintain it for golf. Any plans to reintroduce chemicals would be deeply concerning to residents who live nearby and to those who use this park daily for all manner of activities. Furthermore, for the past 2 years, it has not been necessary to irrigate the land with mains water, which is treated at significant cost to make it safe for drinking. In the current climate and nature emergency, it is wasteful and unacceptable to use this scarce and precious natural resource for the sole purpose of a game of golf. Golf courses use chemicals, use fertilisers, pesticides and water to keep them in a playable condition, weed-free and looking unnaturally green. But just because they are green does not mean that they are environmentally friendly. Golf courses have been described by scientists as a biodiversity desert, taking up a huge amount of land and resources for the benefit of a small number of people, a luxury our planet can no longer afford. We have therefore asked the Council for a clear and unambiguous commitment that no chemicals, including mains water, be used on the High Common under any circumstances. We now ask this panel to support this request. But more than that, the decision to commercialise the High Common with golf is a backward step, reversing the biodiversity gains, and is a poor use of this valuable asset. It is being justified on what happened in the past rather than considering the current policies, priorities and circumstances. It ignores how this green space has now been rediscovered by residents and visitors who use it regularly for all purposes without fear of being hit by a golf ball or harmed by chemicals. Furthermore, there has never been a consultation on the High Common, and the decision is due to be made by a single cabinet member, a process lacking in transparency and governance, and is inconsistent with the Council's commitment to listen to and act for local residents. For all of these reasons, we ask this panel to urgently call in and scrutinise these proposals and declare them inconsistent with the Council's climate declarations and its policy to promote the interests of local residents. And finally, I would like to read you a tweet that Baines has just sent today. Creating habitats for bees, butterflies and other wildlife not only helps us tackle the ecological emergency, it makes our neighbourhoods more varied and colourful. Let's get buzzing. I ask this panel, how does this tweet and the proposal to reinstate golf on the High Common align? In the climate and nature emergency, in the climate and nature emergency that we face, this entire proposal is wrong. Baines Council needs to live up to its climate emergency promises and start practising what it preaches. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the panel to ask a factual question or ask a question that needs clarifying on the statement that's just been said. Councillor May?
It's a question really about the role of this panel. It's a panel, it's not a committee as such. Do we have any powers to actually support this or reject it?
Basically what we will do, we'll ask a factual question and then we will refer this back to the Cabinet Member for Climate Emergency.
Can we do it with a recommendation?
Yes, we can.
I recommend we support this statement, Chairman.
So all those that want to support that statement? Those against the statement? And those that are abstaining? So I think that's majority to abstain. Thank you. So we will pass it back to the relevant Cabinet Member, because I know that you have been speaking with councillors to deal with this. Sorry? It was...
Was it 2 for, 3 against and 2 abstentions?
I thought it was more abstentions. I thought there was 4 abstentions, sorry. So can we just... That's fine, yeah. Yes.
So it could be referred to the Cabinet Member but not with the additional...
That's very true. So shall we go back to the start? So Paul's made a recommendation. Shall we have anybody that wants to second that? So the recommendation was, Paul?
We support the statement that's been made by the Member of Parliament.
Thank you. So anybody wants to second that? So then we can't go to the vote because we don't have a seconder. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Right, so David Redgewell was going to make a statement, but that has been circulated here today. You should have received that. And then we've got Councillor Joanna Wright that also wishes to make a statement. Councillor Wright?
Thank you. As ward councillor for Lambridge, many residents on the east of Bath are repeatedly asking why are the renovation works on Cleveland Bridge taking so long. The disruption of these works is significant to all sections of society, from local residents impacted by long lines of unmoving traffic causing pollution, the impact to traders on deliveries and connections, the hospitality and tourist industry, cyclists forced to deal with signs littered across the cycling space. In short, the closure of this bridge has caused an increase to journey times and distances and further added to Bath's congestion issues and is having a detrimental impact on Bath. On the 28th of April 2022, Baines Council released a press statement in which Councillor Amanda Rigby stated that, in January, contractors unearthed a complex engineering and safety critical issue which reports show does not have a straightforward solution. Engineers need to be 100% certain any solution will not cause a structural failure on other sections of the bridge. This will take time to model, and for this reason, we are extending the temporary traffic regulation order for another 6 months. As a previous joint cabinet member for transport, who was central to these works commencing, I would like to ask this panel to investigate the reason why Cleveland Bridge is still in the process of renovation, and why did it take so long for the works to begin. In one of my first conversations with officers on becoming a cabinet member, I was informed of the absolute necessity to fix Cleveland Bridge. I was told how Cleveland Bridge was a deteriorating heritage asset, a listed Grade 2 star which sits on Bath's primary road network, and that Baines Council is a highway authority which is directed by the Department for Transport to manage the primary road network and has a statutory duty to keep its highway structures safe. As a highway authority, Baines operates a bridge assessment process to national standards. The process can be broken into 2 parts, the assessment of the bridge and the technical approval of the assessment. Both functions require a high degree of competency, as ultimately the technical reviewer is accountable for approving the bridge as safe or agreeing to mitigations. The assessment and the technical review are an evidence-based process that leads to a safety-critical decision being made regarding the safe use of the bridge. The process is based on technical evidence and is free from external influence. However, on passing to Cabinet the critical need from a technical report as to why Cleveland Bridge must be fixed, it became apparent to me that delays to the bridge renovations were a clear political priority for some. The temporary weight limit restrictions had stopped HGVs from crossing Cleveland Bridge, and this was seen as politically convenient. Over many months, obstacles of various sorts were put in place to delay Cleveland Bridge from being fixed, resulting in officers making the renovations an operational decision. I am therefore concerned that the early political delay led to further structural corrosion on Cleveland Bridge, which has forced the original 7-month closure to a point where the Council is presently unable to confirm when this bridge will be fixed or open again for two-way traffic. Please can I ask that this panel looks into the matter?
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Does any panel member have a factual question? Councillor Appleyard?
Yeah, I mean,
So various members of the council, councillors, were quite clear that they did not want that bridge fixed. So because they did... Okay, well, all right. To state then, on the 21st...
Councillor Appleyard, can you put your microphone on? Sorry.
On the 21st of August 2020, I sent an email to Dina Romero to say, and it says, to say I'm appalled by Amanda Rigby's position on Cleveland Bridge is an understatement. The bridge is not safe and needs immediate repair. To not repair it will mean giving back 3.3 million to the DFT. It will mean a lack of credibility of this authority and of WECA, and it will likely mean that we will not get funded for any more highway projects from DFT. Baines will be poorer for this. The bid that was put into the DFT through WECA was robust, and the DFT would not have given Baines this funding without the real need to fix this bridge. I fully appreciate a ward's need to defend their ward issues. However, it would seem to me that some have lost any sight of the need to fix the bridge so it would not fall down or injure anyone. So there were various emails like that sent to Councillor Romero.
Okay, I understand that, and that is a communication between councillors. But my specific question was that you actually indicated that obstructions have been put in the way for officers not to move forward, and that's what I was actually trying to understand. Because what you're actually,
the other thing that
what you're
happened,
actually saying, Chair, I am speaking. What I was actually saying is we need to understand what the obstacles that officers were facing, so we can actually identify whether they were actually factual or whether they were circumstances, not, if you like, the rhetoric between councillors.
Okay, so one of the problems that was set in place was planning permission. So it didn't actually have to go to the planning committee originally for that, and that various councillors made sure that that was a process that was put in place. So that again delayed it.
Can I ask a factual question? That if is the bridge listed in any way and it had to have planning permission for that work? Can I have clarification on that?
It wasn't clear that it would have to have it in the way that it was asked for, or the process through planning.
Planning is such that you either need it or you don't need it.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go on to Councillor Hansel, please.
I'm on the planning committee. Planning was needed for a Grade 2 listed building. There was no choice. The issue had to be Cleveland Bridge had to come to the planning committee. So it had to go through the natural process. That was not an obstacle. So just that was not an avoidable obstacle. Thank you. My question is very similar, and that is, you say that the delays to the bridge renovations were a clear political priority for some. I'm a member of the ruling group. It's never ever been discussed in a party forum. What's your evidence for that?
I don't understand your question.
Well, you say it wasn't the delay you're insinuating was a clear political priority. Well, what's your evidence?
I've got a whole section of emails here that I can put in the public domain if anybody would like them. I don't think we have time this afternoon to read them out.
So you asked this panel to investigate why it's taking so long?
Yes, please.
So we'll then have to go back to relevant officer and cabinet member to ask that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the minutes. So can I have somebody to approve the minutes from the last meeting of the 14th of March? Thank you, Ruth. Sorry, my brain's gone dead. Couldn't remember his surname. So do I have a seconder? So it'll have to be Joel or Dr. Kumar. Grant, sorry. Was you not? So Councillor Kumar, would you like to second the minutes? Thank you. So those that were at that meeting, do we agree the minutes? Councillor Kumar? Thank you. So that's agreed. Thank you very much. Right, so Cabinet member update. Councillor Warren was going to be here today, but she's unwell. She has sent a statement in of her update, so if there's any questions you wish to ask Councillor Warren, please do so.
Just to say, Karen, that the statement submitted by Councillor Warren will attach to the minutes online, so it will be made public as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Right, so we're now going to move on to the City Centre Programme Information Update. Oh, sorry. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd read the email attachment about the cabinet one, and can I ask a question related to that one?
So if you can send your questions back to Councillor Warren, because she's not here to answer them, so you need to do it directly. Okay, so the officers won't be able to, I thought that the officer on behalf will be able to answer. No, that's fine. I can send them, whatever you say. So do we have an officer here that's climate emergency?
No, it's fine. I mean, I can send it to the cabinet member and copy to the officers.
Yes, please. Michaela, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Will there be any public scrutiny of the statement, or is it all just going to be done via email?
Well, she's not here to answer
So I'm just wondering if he's going to come to another meeting of this committee.
So basically what will happen, every other meeting we'll either have Councillor Warren here or Councillor Rigby here to give an update on where they're, because they've got the biggest portfolios, so then you can answer questions then. So she will come back in a couple of months' time, and then again you can scrutinise some of these things, if that makes sense. Yes, Councillor May.
Yeah, can I just ask a question around the affordable warmth? There's quite clearly that the government grants are for low-income houses, but in terms of climate emergency, have we got any data that is available for what's happening with other properties? Because those numbers are very small, but what we're talking about is probably quite a large issue. So has she got any basic...
I think that would be a question you can go back to, and I think if she can CC Michaela in that, and then it can all be circulated. Please. So that we all know the answers to that question. Right, so Linda, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate, for inviting me along today. So the panel requested an update on the city centre security programme, which you will all be aware of has been in train now since 2016. And subject to various public consultations, so I'll come on to the programme of delivery shortly. In addition, I wanted to use this opportunity to update you on the wider strategic approach to security and public safety across Bath and North East Somerset, on our review of our CCTV systems, but also the forthcoming Protect duty, which will increase the responsibility for all local authorities on publicly accessible locations. As I said, this report doesn't seek to make any recommendations, but to present to you what we are planning to do and for you to be part of that review process, particularly on the CCTV and the Protect duty. So city centre security, as you know, we introduced the TROs for anti-terrorism purposes on Cheap Street, Lower Borough Walls on the 1st of January 2022, and York Street was subject to a public inquiry. The public inquiry found in favour of the council, and we are currently seeking Secretary of State approval now, because the closure will be for 12 hours. We now need Secretary of State approval now to close York Street under the ATTRO. Notwithstanding that, we are starting the programme of works to start installing permanent bollards. So the bollards that you see out on the streets are temporary, and that was always the plan to replace them with sliding bollards and static bollards. These bollards are what we deem as PAS rated. That means that they will withstand any one that wishes to penetrate, a vehicle that wishes to penetrate those streets. It will prevent them from doing so. So the programme of works commenced in Burton Street last week, and that's the advanced ducting works that are required. That will be on all of the locations. That's then followed by the statutory undertaker programme of works. That's the utility companies. All of the utility companies have been issued with orders, and we are in the process of paying their invoices to enable them then to dictate their programme of works. Unfortunately, what we can't do, you'll be aware, is to dictate to the statutory undertakers when they undertake their work. In an ideal world, we would like them to do it concurrently, but unfortunately, we're not living in an ideal world, but as much as possible, the team are working with the utility companies to put in that programme. Once those works have been undertaken, we will then start to install the sliding bollards and the static bollards. We are planning for the completion of these works by the 31st of March next year, and it will necessitate us working through the Christmas period, but we are working with, the Christmas market actually comes under my service area, so very much working hand in hand with the Christmas market team to ensure that there's no disruption to the market, but also to the city during that period. It is a very challenging programme to deliver. We're working above vaults and cellars, and anyone that's worked in the city centre or has been involved in any projects in the city centre will understand those challenges. We have to work very carefully. But at the same time, we want to maintain access for residents, for those with vehicle access, including blue badge holders at all times. It may be that it's a different route that the blue badge holders have to gain access, but we are very clear that we want to maintain access at all times. We are starting tomorrow with a series of webinars for businesses and residents, and we will continue to do those as we reach each phase of the programme. We will also be putting out e-newsletters to anyone that signs up for an e-newsletter, and we have contacted blue badge holders directly, and that will continue. There will be a point of contact on site at all times, and with a direct phone and email address for anyone with any queries. So that's the city centre security, the programme, and I want to sort of, do you want me to pause there for any questions? Or
no, I'm just going to go to Councillor Rigby so she can just give her update as well.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've not got very much to add, other than to say I think as a council we deserve, we need to give thanks to Linda and her team for the absolute inordinate amount of work the City Centre Security Scheme has been, up to and including the public inquiry. For those of you who haven't had a chance to read the full statement, it is a public document, and it could not have gone further in its praise for how proportionate our response was. And the thing that gives me specific gratitude to the team is we were picked out for particular praise about the level of the consultation that we did, specifically around accessibility issues, which were not easy to overcome, but they have been overcome. And since it's been in place for anywhere other than York Street since January, I know I was right in saying this a couple of weeks ago, I hope I'm still right in saying it, there's been absolutely no complaints whatsoever, and everyone who's needed access has been able to get in. So from something that was a really very difficult programme, I am so pleased for Linda and Chris and the rest of the team.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby. Councillor Appleyard.
Is that better? One is the other utilities and that. I must admit, I was under the impression that we did work on some sort of cooperation basis for planned work, but I can certainly understand that emergency work you can't build into a schedule. But what you're saying is that there's no undertaking or need for an undertaking for them to work with us in that area. And my other question was, obviously the blue badge holders, although they're a small part of the overall piece, they're obviously quite an important part and quite a vocal part. In the time where we've had the manned entry, have we actually been taking note of the numbers and of people accessing and the type of access that we've given to people, so we have a clearer picture of that moving forward?
So when I said we can't programme the utilities, what I should have said is we're working with them, and we work very closely, the highway design team work very closely with the utilities, and we have a good relationship with them to programme as best we can, Rob, on the programme. What I'm just saying is that I'm highlighting that whilst we will work hard for them to be concurrent or simultaneously, we cannot guarantee that at this stage until I get their programme through. So that's that one. In terms of blue badge holders, and it was something, I put a dash to tell you the number and I completely forgot to write it down, so apologies. But I can tell you that, and we've actually had a couple of emails in the last week, because we've contacted blue badge holders thanking us for allowing access for disabled users through in Westgate Street. We've had no complaints at all. The only issue we had was somebody presenting with a blue badge that wasn't actually a legitimate blue badge holder, and they were prevented access. So that's the only one we've had, but we've had no issues with blue badge holders at all.
So just following on from Councillor Appleyard's question, so parking for disabled residents, Cheap Street, Westgate Street, that's double yellow lines, I believe, all the way down through there, isn't it?
On one side, yes.
Just on one side. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise because I'm new, so if it's a daft question, I do apologise. But it strikes me that the times of operation, are you saying terrorists don't work after 4 o'clock in the afternoon? 6 o'clock in the afternoon? Because I see you've gone till 10 o'clock on York Street. It just feels to me perhaps the times were fairly limited.
Okay, so if I think no, we don't. A terrorist will work when a terrorist wants to work. What we've chosen are those most when the streets are the most crowded. So working with our colleagues at police and counter-terrorism, so when we know that the footfall is high, that's when we are preventing access. What we have to balance is the need of businesses for service vehicles to come in, waste, cleansing, deliveries, etc. But it's all part of a layered approach across the council and with our partners on how we address counter-terrorism. So that's our CCTV operators, that's the bid rangers that are on the ground, it's the people working in the shops, our tourist attractions, and giving them the skills and the training to be able to identify somebody that may be a potential terrorist. The police also deploy what's called Project Servitor, so you may see on occasion a large number of police on the streets. They might be with horses, or they might be just walking around handing out information. That's again another preventative tool to show any would-be terrorist that we are serious about protecting our residents and our businesses and our visitors in the city. So it's all part of a layered approach. Of course, we can't say that a terrorist will come, when they will or won't deploy, but we do everything we can to try and mitigate it.
So will the TROs allow us to have that flexibility if you need to change as you see those patterns emerge? So
if the terrorist risk increases, so if we move from substantial to severe or severe, forgive me, I've forgotten the top one, move to critical, then the TRO allows us to respond accordingly. So it may be that, on police advice, because it has to be on police advice, that we make the decision that blue badge holders aren't allowed access at this time, or nobody is allowed access at all. And as you may know, the country has only gone to critical, I think, on 2 occasions, probably in the last 10, 15 years, and it's usually for a very short period of time. Yeah. At the same time, where we have, say, Remembrance Service, or the Christmas market, or an event in the city that has been assessed by the police as a high-risk event, we may then make the decision that those roads are closed more permanently than they currently are.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I have a question. So you're saying you're going to use entry managed by a video management system. So if I go down Cheap Street, Westgate Street, it's 7:30 in the morning, because it's all open, and I leave at 10:10, the system will allow me out, will it?
Hopefully you won't be in there at 10:10 because the road closes at 10 o'clock and that you would have already vacated, but what the marshals or the CCTV would do, so if you were parked there at 10 o'clock, then the CCTV team usually then would contact parking services and say there's a vehicle parked, can you go and check it out for us? And that's what the parking services would do at that point. If we couldn't identify the owner of that vehicle, then we have a conversation with the police, and the police usually then get involved because it is a security zone.
But so it's just saying that
you can get out.
That's fine.
Yes, you will be able to get out.
That's
yes,
fine.
sorry.
Thank you. So, Councillor Rigby.
Can I just add a little bit to the question you asked about the blue badge parking as well, just in case it wasn't completely clear? because the other traffic is now banned, actually it's made blue badge parking much easier because people aren't in competition with everyone else who used to be driving in. So in fact this has been a plus point, and we've had quite a few people commenting on how much easier it's been for them than having just a few disabled bays parked, but everyone else coming in and being in competition. Now they can park anywhere and no one else can go in.
Any other questions? Councillor Johnson?
It's more on what you were discussing earlier about if we were raised to critical, and I just wondered why you would then, you said you potentially might stop access for blue badge holders in that situation. I mean, the access points, if I can only just visualise them, if there was a car in the way, what would be the problem with allowing access into one of those roads? I can't see how it would change the sort of threat. You know, when you've got the barriers there in place, surely they would come back up again, or, you know.
Yeah, so it might be the decisions made to prevent anyone else accessing that street. And the reason, I can't give you that reason at the moment. It might have been, let's take the Glasgow airport example, where the vehicle went in and the threat level, I believe at that time, did raise to critical. And so until the police have understood what the threat is to the country and ruled out that it's, you know, whatever it can be, I could make something up, but I'm not going to do that. But whatever that threat is, they're not going to, they'll say, at this moment in time, no vehicles are allowed into your security area, into those areas. And then, you know, it might be for an hour, it might be for 2 hours, it might be for 3 days. I don't know, I can't answer that, but we will work closely with the police as we currently do.
Thank you for that. So outside of these operational hours, will the barriers just be left open, or will they be on, I'm trying to work out, because there's not much detail in how the actual system sort of works, and I don't tend to drive through Bath very often, so I wouldn't know. But yeah, just a bit more clarification, like after 6, do the barriers then open? Are they left open after 6? You know, how does that work?
Yeah, so at the moment they're manually operated, so we have a marshal there. So at 6 o'clock, yes, they are opened and they remain open until 10 a.m. in the morning. However, parking in certainly Cheap Street, Westgate Street, etc., is still only for blue badge holders, but it also allows for loading and unloading. So yeah, they will, and so on the sliding system at 6 o'clock in the evening, they will open and remain open throughout the day. What I should also say is that with our emergency services, so all of the blue light services, we have access straight into their control room and vice versa, so they're aware. So if we know that if an ambulance or fire are going to be arriving under a blue light, the CCTV can be ready for them, and then they will automatically open the bollards for them. So yeah, that's how the system works.
Thank you.
Councillor Kumar?
Thank you very much. Just very specific 3 questions that obviously there has been so much of hue and cry about, and people have called it as ring of steel or something. But where do general people find the police report or indication that there was a threat, and when was that? Has there been any changes recently in the police report? And if in future, the third question is, there's no threat, as police may suggest, what will happen to that? Will we have a change in policy? Thank you. Because many people say there was any indication from the police that something like this even was there, any threat in Bath city centre.
Thank you, Councillor. So the report was written in 2016 by the National Association of Counter-Terrorism Office. That report is confidential and has not been shared widely, and it won't be shared widely. The threat level still remains, as was identified in that 2016 report. And so at the moment, there is no intention to change anything. And in fact, the next part of my subject that I'm coming on to with the protect duty, I actually think that there will be more obligations on local authorities working both with public and private sector organisations to be doing more.
Yeah, you didn't answer my final question, if police, because it has been, I appalled to know that this has been 6 years now, and we are following a report. Things have changed dramatically in last 6 years, or even last 6 months. Things change. And I come from a country where terrorism is one of the biggest problems. But even there, things do change, and it changes dramatically to some extent. So why we are doing something on the basis of a report at least 6 years ago, and as I said, if the police report is not available widely, can it be made available to councillors in any case? And if not, then it's fine. But and finally, if police does come, and who will decide when, because there is a need for assessment. It has been already 6 years, and police and relevant authorities should do an assessment as early as possible, perhaps, and then change everything accordingly. Thank you.
Yeah, as I said, Councillor, so the threat level remains as it was 6 years when the report was written. It's still a tangible risk. The report won't be made available to you. It is confidential. And as I said, in the next section of my report, what I'm calling it is the protect duty. And the counter-terrorism advisors, whilst we're waiting for that, are expecting to have to do a reassessment of crowded places and more publicly accessible locations. So yes, the city will be reassessed. And I think I should say, the police wouldn't deploy operations like Project Servitor and be actively working with us if they felt that the city didn't need a protection, that we needed to take our security and safety seriously.
Thank you, and thank you for updating us on the City Centre Security Programme. So that moves us on now to the Recycling Hub update. Oh, sorry.
So, apologies, Chair. Okay, so it leads on nicely is the protect duty. The protect duty has come from the Manchester Arena attack and was championed by a mother of a man called Martin, and you may have heard of Martin's Law. And the premise of Martin's Law was around how you can protect those spaces where somebody is travelling between various locations, whether that's the arena to the transport hub, and whose responsibility is it to protect that individual or those people as they move from those areas. So the government consulted on protect duty last year, and that is currently going through waiting a royal assent before it becomes law, and we're expecting that to become law in the next 12 to 18 months. It sits under the counter-terrorism strategy called Contest, which is pursue, prevent, protect and prepare. And the proposal is to set up a BANES Protect and Prepare board. It's around targeting venues, organisations, businesses, local authorities and individuals who own or operate publicly accessible locations. So that can be squares, parks, Bath Rugby Ground, Southgate Shopping Centre, First Bus, GWR, all those transport networks. Sorry. So we want to work together with our partners, and we've already met with internal services, and I've also met with Southgate, with transport providers and venues in readiness for this protect duty coming into law so that we're ahead of the game. obviously working alongside Avon and Somerset Police and Counter-Terrorism Southwest. So it's just to make you aware that we are setting up this Protect and Prepare board, which then fits very nicely into our strategic security surveillance review. So we recognise at the moment we manage over 400 public space cameras within the council's CCTV team, and we also have a number of our corporate property estate that feeds into the CCTV hub, Heritage Services, the Guildhall, etc. Obviously, the cameras are there to improve the safety and protection of our communities. And in 2021, there was a cross-party motion was passed on the safety of women and girls in public places. So fitting in with Protect Duty and fitting in with our commitment to the safety of women and girls, but everyone actually in our public spaces, we want to do a review of our public space cameras. Are they in the right place? Do we have the right system? We have growing demand all the time from members of the public, from councillors, from the police for more cameras, and we need to think strategically about whether or not they are in the right place and they are serving the right purpose. In addition to this, we don't have a dedicated incident response room, a control room, if there is an incident or a planned event. So we're undertaking a feasibility and options appraisal to look at our CCTV system, but also to present a fully costed business case for an aspirational centralised 24/7 security hub, which allows us to flex with future demand, but also have incident room capacity. So that's our plan.
So normally on an agenda item, panel members get 2 questions, but you've done this in 2 sections. So I'll allow panel members 1 more question to Linda.
I didn't know that was your rules, Chair, sorry. I've never followed rules. I just think the contest concept is absolutely perfect, and we should be preparing for it now. We've got the livable neighbourhood teams going out consulting about creating areas within communities, even Whitchurch and Pensford and places like that. So can I just have your assurance that you will be looking at the whole of Bath and North East Somerset and not just Bath? Because I think there are, yes, Keynsham, Poulton, there's other areas where the public are, and you never know where these people are going to actually turn up. So that was my first part of the question. And with the CCTV, I think there is the issue of linking that in with ANPR to see whether we could actually have a wider network across the area, because I think that is also quite important. So that's one question in 2 bits, Chair. Thank you.
It will cover the whole of Bath and North East Somerset, not just Bath City Centre, and we are looking at everything, Councillor.
It's good to know. Councillor Johnson.
I'm just, I thought the recommendations you were making and the steps you were taking is are fantastic, and it should probably be done a while ago. But from that, and speaking about a while ago and previous budgets that we've scrutinised, CCTV has actually been one of those things that faced cuts to make budgetary savings, and now we're obviously shifting completely opposite way. So that's going to have an impact on our budget. It's going to have an impact financially on the council. I'm just wondering if, big picture, are we prepared and do we know what this is going to look like from a cost perspective when this is an area that we've fought to slash budget or make budget savings from in the past?
Yeah, so this review, the strategic review that we're undertaking is, we're doing it as quickly as we can so that we meet the budget cycle ready for next year, but it might not be for investment in 23-24, it might be 24-25, but we want to highlight the recommendations from the report, what we want to take forward, and it'll be subject to a cabinet report in the autumn, so it will be a decision as part of that process.
So I just have a question as well. Talking about CCTV, and you said the police wants to see more put in place, but is the police going to give more resources to looking at these videos? Because sometimes they say it doesn't matter what the incident is, they've only got a short time. So it's a quick 15 minutes, and the video may be an hour. They'll only look at 15 minutes. Are they also going to include more resources?
The police have the same challenges as us on resources, but one of the conversations we continue to have with the police is where we can potentially do joint funding bids, whether that's through Safer Streets or other opportunities, and we will continue to have those conversations with them.
Thanks, Lupi. Sorry, I got that
Just through the chair, asking if I'll get an answer to my written question.
I can give you that answer now, Councillor, if you would like it, or would you like it in
The
writing?
records of all 400?
No, not the records of all 400, because unfortunately that's not an easy task, and it will take a long time for us to provide the data that you require. We're hoping that the new system will be more data smart and more data efficient. If you would like that data, I can get it to you, but it will take us some time. With regards to your specific question on Keynsham, all CCTV is working in Keynsham. The only time it wasn't working was when the public realm works were taking place in the High Street, where we had to disconnect and then reconnect. But all CCTV is working in Keynsham as I speak at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby?
Sorry, could I just add something? In fact, it's to your question again, really, around the CCTV. It's a conversation that we've all been having about part of what we're going to be looking at is movable CCTV. So if there are specific events or specific hotspots, together with the police, we can work out a plan to go and say, right, we're going to really go and flood an area for a certain amount of time. So absolutely, we will be talking to everybody to say, you know, what is it that you require most? And then budget dependent, good point, Councillor Johnson, we will have to work out what it is that we're going to be able to provide. But I actually think to have a responsive CCTV that can go to different places when there are events will actually be transformational for what we can achieve in terms of security.
Good to know, thank you. So I think, sorry, we bring that to an end. So thank you for your time this afternoon. It's very much appreciated. So, Recycling Hub plans update. So I'd like to introduce Kate Hobson, who's going to introduce this item.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And just sitting here listening to others and reading my own paper, I realised I've assumed that everybody understands what the Kingston Recycling Hub is. So I thought I'd just recap quickly. My colleague Chris May, who leads the construction and maintenance team who are delivering the project, came to this panel earlier this year and gave a presentation on some of the design and build features that apply to the climate emergency and sustainability. So hopefully some of you will remember that. But in essence, it is the replacement consolidated depot and recycling operations hub that we're building on a 4-hectare site just outside Keynsham, between Keynsham and Salford, off Pixash Lane, where our current recycling centre is, which has been a long-standing project for the council to replace outdated and poorly maintained in the past buildings, long in need of improvement, both in terms of the infrastructure for recycling and our collection services, but also for our staff, our frontline staff who've been working in somewhat poor conditions for many years. So I thought I'd just give that little recap quickly. So what I'm going to talk about a bit more, or the paper talks about a bit more, is the actual Pixash construction contract, which is now in full swing. And I'm also going to just touch on some of the work that we're doing around the actual relocation when it happens next year, which is Programme 2, so related to things we're actioning with the staff themselves and other equipment and so on we need to move. And then there are a couple of allied projects that are coming through, a project called the Waste Modernisation Project, which got provisional capital programme entry in the February 2022 budget report. And so they're more recent projects that we're now moving forward with, so I'll update on those. So at Pixash, the full build scheme is now in full flow and progressing really fast. It's on a tight programme, and the Appendix A that I attached to the report attempts to show some of the progress that has been made, so relating where some of the site has been cleared and there's foundations and piling being done already for certain areas, relating to some of the original aerial view drawings. A couple of the key things at the moment are we have changed the access point to the current recycling centre recently, which allows the new electricity substation for the whole site to be built in the old entrance, and that's been very successful and has actually improved some of the traffic flows at the moment around the site, which is always good news because it's a busy recycling centre and does incur congestion around there occasionally. Particularly at the weekends. What's actually happening this week is some other works on Pixash Lane by our construction contractor and also the Hambley Care Home, which is right next door. Unfortunate timing that some things are happening at the same time. But it does mean that Pixash Lane itself is going to need to be closed or partially closed and have diversions in place for some time over the next few months. Which also allows utilities upgrades to be made and utilities and services upgrades to be made for the site. So it is important and critical work. And similar to something Linda was saying earlier, we're doing our best with Farrens, our construction contractor, to ensure there's as little disruption as possible to the local residents and businesses and visitors to the recycling centre, of course, and to other attractions in the area. So another current activity is a Section 73 planning submission has been made by Farrens, or the planning consultant, which relates to a number of changes to some of the designs, to some of the buildings on the site, mainly sort of in public terms, visual changes to some of the structures, but it does change to a degree the way some of them are built, which will produce some financial savings through the contract for us. So there is some benefit to it as well. So I just wanted to highlight those points. So in relation to the actual, sorry, I've just realised I've missed the key milestones. In November 22, so later this year, the new public recycling centre will open at Pixash. So that is going to be a much improved site which will increase the amount that people can recycle and the amount of the different materials that people can bring to the site to recycle. The existing public recycling centre, as I've talked about already, will stay open until that time, so there'll be no disruption to the service there. And the timing for the opening of the reuse shop that's also planned for part of the recycling centre, it will be a little bit later on, and hopefully we're working towards February or March next year. And then the full site will be finished in the summer next year. July is the target month when all our operations will relocate from Ashmead Road depot round the corner from Pixash and from Midland Road in Bath, and also our fleet workshops from Midland Road and Locksbrook Road and Ashmead Road will all relocate. So that's mostly our frontline staff and vehicles. Obviously the collection vehicles and disposal transfer vehicles will all relocate there. So those are the two key milestones really. So related to those frontline staff and the vehicles moving to Pixash, there's obviously a substantial tranches of work that we need to do with the staff to prepare them for the relocation, retraining on different equipment and so on, that kind of thing. We will review our collection rounds, and any changes that are necessary to collection days for residents will be notified well in advance so that people will know where their day is, but we're not anticipating too many. We will be switching to Arctic haulage, larger vehicles for hauling out some of the materials from the site to its treatment points, which will produce some carbon emission savings by having higher payloads per trip, so that's another benefit we're working on. One critical point also is that the current Midland Road public recycling centre in Bath, that will actually stay open now until we have developed and built and opened a new like-for-like recycling centre for Bath in the Bath area. We're focusing some work on Odd Down at the moment, but it's important to highlight that the Midland Road Recycling Centre will stay open. And then we have some lease depots currently, which is one of the reasons for the consolidation at Pixash, so they need to have break notices served and dilapidations dealt with. So there's a number of work streams there. So moving on to the recycling centre for Bath, that is forming a separate project at the moment. So we're starting some concentrated and focused work on that right now. It's early days since the February budget report allowed the programme entry, but we do need to keep progressing that with some speed to ensure that it's ready and built as soon as we can. And for the medium-term financial planning process still needs to have a business case brought forward. So we're working on that with speed, as I say. A couple of other elements of the modernisation projects are Bring recycling banks in Bath, which we're looking at identifying at least 3 sites where we can introduce Bring sites for some of the curbside recyclables that we collect, the common ones like glass, plastics, bottles and pots and tubs and trays, and cans, steel cans and aluminium cans, and so on. There's a separate project, as I say, working on that to identify sites, consult with the local ward councillors, and then bring forward recommendations for those later on this summer. And the third tranche of work is looking at plastic films and wrappers and how we may be able to collect those. They are a tricky material at the moment because there aren't any reprocessing facilities in this country yet. We've identified one company who are planning to build a facility in South Wales in, well, hopefully summer, autumn next year, but obviously it's early days for them to be able to commit to that, but we're monitoring that situation. In the meantime, we are looking at ways we can collect those materials, films and wrappers and plastic bags and so on, both at our current recycling centres and at the Bring recycling banks that I've just mentioned. And also there's a mandate coming through from DEFRA, our central government department, talking about making curbside collections of those materials mandatory in the future, maybe 3 or 4 years hence, as part of some of their strategy and policy. So we keep monitoring all of that very closely. So that's sort of a sum up of the work that's going on. The last section I put in the report is looking at more specifically at some of the climate emergency and sustainability elements, and particularly trying to focus on the work we're doing to construct some baseline evidence or draw together some baseline evidence of what we're doing at the moment, and how we can adapt that to report it in future to be able to measure some of the success of the site, because our aim is to be able to increase recycling through offering more materials able to recycle for residents, but also the modern baling and sorting equipment that's going to be installed will enable us to recycle more efficiently and effectively as well. So we need to be able to measure that, obviously. Some of the building and infrastructure features that Chris would have talked about, obviously there's going to be some measurements there we can do over our current electricity usage at our current sites and compare that to future when a lot of the roof space will be covered with solar panels, and we'll be generating a lot of our own electricity, which is obviously going to have a huge financial benefit with what's happening at the moment, certainly. And then one of the other key areas is obviously around carbon emissions from vehicles. The site is being future-proofed to be able to convert our vehicles, even our collection fleet, to electric vehicles in future. So we're kind of bringing together some baseline data to measure what our emissions are at the moment, litres used per vehicle and that kind of thing, so that we can then, as I say, measure our success in future and how that looks. And the final point I just really wanted to make on that is that our construction contractor, Farrens, does have a very active climate change and environment policy structure themselves. So they're sort of working on some of those features through the construction. One early example that I'm quoting at the moment is their site offices are very ultra-modern. It's only the second site, we believe, in the country where cabins like this are being used. They are Energy B rated, which means they're very highly rated compared to a lot of houses. And they're using a hybrid power system with a generator with battery storage as well. The generator is powered by HVO rather than diesel. And they're also putting in a rainwater harvest system. So, following some of our principles of the final build, they're implementing those through their phase as well. So that's me.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Appleyard?
Yeah, I think that was a pretty full report, so thank you very much. And I think it's certainly recognised there's a lot of work that's going on there. Just really want a couple of questions. One is around the Midland Road. I mean, I use that occasionally because it's an easy one to use and everything like this. And it's like everything, everybody's got an opinion down there, and you speak to the operatives down there, and they're very positive about everything. But the one thing that has cropped up is if we're bringing all these services into Midland Road, you know where I'm going on this one, into Midland Road, there doesn't seem to be any facility there for the vehicles or the volume of vehicles we're expecting on there. Now, it may be that this was a trade-off in terms of what we could get on the available site, but the consequence is that we're actually going to impact on the neighbouring roads. And so I'm just wondering what thought was in and around that. And there's a second question, only generated from your comments, is that do we actually have any PV panels or anything like that going in on Midland Road?
Sorry, any what panels, did you say?
Solar panels.
Solar panels?
Yeah.
We're not planning to install any at Midland Road at the moment, no, because its life is relatively limited now, we're hoping. There will be the opportunity...
No, sorry, I'm sorry.
Pixash.
Pixash.
Right,
Pixash.
yes.
I'm talking about Pixash. I didn't mean Midland Road. I'm talking about Pixash.
Yeah, okay,
and
sorry.
Pixash about the cars. My apologies.
Yes, as much roof space as possible is going to have solar panels on them. Yeah.
What, from the word go?
Yes, absolutely, from the word go.
And then my point about bringing all these vehicles onto site, how are we going to manage that without causing neighbourly issues?
Yeah, it's a very important point. So part of the planning permission is a sustainable staff travel plan, which was a sort of an obligation through that process. So that's laid out through that, and it's a planning condition that we have to comply with before we can occupy. It will consist of, you're right, that there isn't a parking space for every single member of staff to be able to travel there by car. So in line with the council's related policies around single car use and encouraging people to use other forms of transport, the staff travel plan looks at car sharing for those car spaces that are available. Potentially, we haven't fully developed the whole implementation yet, I should say, but there are also electric charge points in that area, so there may be some prioritisation for staff who do have electric cars. There's a big bike shed and motorcycle, two-wheeled motored vehicles, parking spaces, so that people can choose those options and be confident that there's a secure and safe place for them to leave them during the day. And then I don't know if you're aware, we run a minibus from Radstock Road up to Midland Road at the moment for staff who live down in the south of the district. So we're looking at increasing that and also adding different locations for those sorts of minibuses to help staff get to work. And then there's also obviously public transport options. The A4 does have, I think it's 6 bus routes runs along it, mostly east-west rather than sort of north to south, south to north or north to south. So, but it's still there, and also the train station in Keynsham obviously may be an option for some people, as well as staff who live locally. If as we move on and move to the site, we may recruit more staff in that area who may be able to walk.
So if you're having the train station as part of that solution and that, will you have the ability to have voice scooters at the depot so people can use those as well?
We can't at the moment because they're only legal when they're part of an official scheme. So at the moment we can't, but obviously it's something we'll be monitoring, whether there is some relaxation there that we could introduce that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And then my other point, my other question was about Midland Road. Now, that's got planning permission at the moment, isn't it? And I suspect it's about 2/3 of its way through its 3-year term, and I can't imagine that we're actually going to have a solution in place for Bristol on there. So that'll have to be reapplied for. But my concern was about these bring sites, where you said you can bring the curbside recycling elements in there. I can't see that is actually the issue, because people can curbside. I can understand flat dwellers and that being able to use that, and that's good. But we, on the east side of Bath, we will not have a place for the other type of refuge, which is more relevant to the depots. And to ask people to, and if you're looking at Odd Down, to ask people to travel from the east side of Bath over the city, I suspect some won't do that. And so what arrangements will there be for a mini hub over on the east side of Bath somehow? And I know there was a consultation that went out asking for sites. And I must admit, I thought that was a very weak request, because I think it generates more of a case of people say what they don't want because they protect the area. But there was no indication of what type of model would actually suit in terms of sizing or access and limitations. So, so I'm struggling to understand whether that consultation is going to give us.
Okay, can I just answer the first point about the Midland Road planning? Because my understanding is that it doesn't have a time limit, but I'll endeavour to check.
Unless you've actually started the development. I mean, you have to start the development for that to sort of be accurate. If you haven't done anything, I think it becomes extinct after 3 years.
Okay, well, maybe we need to check that. Well, with regard to sites in Bath, we have done a number of site searches over the course of the last 4, 5, 6 years. Everyone here will be well aware that Bath is a World Heritage Site and has, surrounded by Green Belt and AONB. So, in essence, the site searches have ended up focusing on the Odd Down area as the most deliverable areas that we're likely to be able to have success. So that's our focus at the moment. And we have included in site searches over the years, going down a scale in size, or scales in size, to kind of small mini hubs. And they, literally, we've been unable to identify some that we feel would be deliverable. The added layer to that is that a small site where we're trying to deal with certain materials, normal black sack materials and others than dry sort of inert recyclables, we end up in needing environmental permitting and probably planning permission and full security, fencing around a site, CCTV and proper staffing, and a lot more infrastructure than we will need for a bring recycling bank. So that's been part of the layer of the deliverability.
I mean, I get that, but residents don't see it. They just see the inability to get rid of the black bag stuff without having to travel across the city. Okay, I've asked my point. Thank you.
So we'll move on to Councillor May.
Can I thank you for the presentation? It's very interesting, being new here today. I've got four parts to my one question.
More than one.
You said about people coming from Radstock Road. Are the proposals actually going to shut down Welton transfer station? It's not. And that's not on the agenda at all in terms of modernisation. But you're not closing down the Welton Centre?
No.
Lovely, thank you. The other thing, the second question was about the black bag. We've got a contract that takes those over to Avonmouth. Will this actually start to reduce the amount of general waste that goes over to Avonmouth?
Well, increasing recycling, most of that should come out of the black bags. We have composition analysis done on frequent basis, sort of every year or so, which shows how much recyclate is still in black bags. So encouraging that to come out of the black bags and into curbside collections or to be brought to the recycling centre will reduce that. However, there are other elements of it that we don't have so much control over, in the sense of what people put in their black bags, we have to collect and take away to the treatment site. So, we'll always be endeavouring to increase the recycling, but if there are materials that are unrecyclable going in the black bags, we have to deal with it.
Right.
So our aim is to reduce it.
But there'll be
yes.
no facility on this site that stops you having to take all the stuff over to Avonmouth, which is, really quite, in climate terms, an expensive journey to be taking.
Do you mean, are we building a treatment plant at Pixash, in which case the answer is no. It would require a substantial tranche more space to do that, and hugely significant cost to build a treatment plant.
The third question was, you made mention of electric vehicles.
Yep.
As I understand it, you can't have electric dust carts going up hills in Bath.
Well, we did.
So is the technology, it's nice to say that, but is the technology capable of doing that?
It's developing. We did have a demonstration RCV, refuse collection vehicle, that struggled. We've had a more recent one which did a lot better, but it's technology that's developing, so we're very hopeful that, yes, it will come to fruition.
So I'll aim for three.
And the last one is very quick.
Better be.
Pardon?
Yeah, better be.
On the little diagram you show, and looking at the map of the existing recycling centre, it looks as though the building's going to be over the existing recycling centre, but you said you were going to keep the existing centre open all the time.
We are. That's my not very professional outline on this aerial image. I apologise. It was an indication of where the big Merfyn waste transfer station will go, but that is going to be built in the second phase. So by then we will have closed the recycling centre and moved. So that will allow that to happen.
Thank you. So, Councillor Johnson.
Well, just want to sort of start by saying I think this is a fantastic project. I deal with a lot with waste in my day job, so it's something that I'm very interested in. And I think there's lots of great stuff happening here, and I've just got a few questions about the project more generally. And I'll try and, can I ask three, or is that against?
To do a presentation.
We've seen recently that there's been a change in the amount of waste we dispose of that goes to landfill as a council, which is good, but it's led to obviously more waste being recovered for energy. And is the main objective of this project to actually then start to see that change from waste that's recovered to waste that's recycled? Because I think what would be good is to see some targets, or just try to think of, we're doing this big project, it's costing the council a lot of money. Do we have an idea of what an ambition for where the council wants to be from a recycling percentage of the waste of the council? Because we have seen that high increase in recovered rather than landfill, which I'm not going to argue isn't bad, but are we going to then start that next step in the sort of how we deal with waste?
Yes, my colleague Sarah Alder, who's the Strategy and Contracts Team Manager, is just finalising some work on the waste strategy. So that will become a published document in due course fairly soon, I gather, and that will look at the council strategy in terms of increasing recycling and targets, as you say, and that links very much with central government's initiatives around plastics and plastic recycling and deposit return schemes and other initiatives that sort of look at the wider field of recycling and waste, whereas this site is sort of focused fairly specifically on providing the infrastructure for us to deal with the collections that we're making on a daily basis around the district, obviously, and then dealing with that waste and recycling to move it off-site to various reprocessing facilities around the district and region and indeed the country, some of it. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
So The other thing, on the Bring Recycling Banks scheme that you've mentioned in Bath, there's no I haven't got an idea of what these sort of look like, and I think that's quite important in a heritage setting. And I've seen in other cities that do this type of thing in where there's high levels of HMOs and what have you. They're not always the most attractive. So I'm just wondering, have we thought about the impact on the heritage setting that these are going to be placed in, and will we ever get an idea of maybe what they might look like? I'll just ask my final question, is that you talk about HVO use in vehicles as part of the making the fleet more sustainable, which is really great. I just wondered if the council had been looking into HHO additive systems, which is the introduction of hydrogen, which then actually makes fuel go further, and then obviously saving the council money is the best way of probably looking at it, but it's also, it helps in cleaning the fuel as well.
Right, so Bring Recycling Banks, yes, obviously we're enormously conscious of the visual impact of them, and that's one of the criteria, if you like, for my colleague who's been working on trying to identify locations. Part of the answer to that is literally how they will look in terms of housing for actual bins, which can be quite variable and made to a degree to suit the surroundings. And the other element will be the management of them. So it will be part of our business case. We'll be looking at how often we will empty them and how often we'll visit them to clear up any waste that's left around, the bins, which does happen, unfortunately. People will take advantage of the fact that there's a facility, there. So that will be part of the answer to keeping them looking nice. There will be a substantial resource required to keep on top of all of that. HVO, yes, I mean, colleagues on the operations side and the fleet side are monitoring situations with regard to HVO and other fuels, as well as looking at electricity. In terms of the Pixash site, for example, we're future-proofing it by making sure we have the appropriate ducting channels in place to be able to install charge points and so on. But we're not actually installing the charge points until we are sure that that will be the way to go, and for how many vehicles and at what stages. So we're not we're not putting our eggs into one basket right now, but so we're keeping our options open on that and monitoring what's going on.
It was more just the HHO additive systems that you could add to existing diesel or vegetable oil.
Yeah, I'll have to come back to you on that one because the HHO isn't meaning a great deal to me. HVO does, but not the HHO, so we'll come back on that one. It's
just the introduction of hydrogen as an additive.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Malloy?
Thank you. I'm very pleased to see included your point about recycling plastic film and wrappers, hopefully sometime next year when that becomes possible. I've personally started encouraging my family to try and keep it separate, so out of the black bins, as it were, and it's amazing how it does accumulate, and it makes you very conscious of what you're buying, and then hopefully, it'll lead to us buying less stuff that's wrapped in plastic. But anyway, so that I'm very pleased to hear about that. But really, my question was more connected with that, but to do with community engagement. And I know the council, as far as I understand, does work with schools in particular, but they're not actually mentioned here. So I was just going to ask you, will looking, as part of all of this moving forward, and especially when we're able to recycle these soft plastics, will you have a big push with the schools and get them all involved? Because I think that would be really good. Thank you.
So the communications activity around promoting recycling really sits with the strategy and contracts team, but yes, there are officers and working actively on engaging community and where resources allow, giving talks to schools and so on. But it certainly, when we introduce a new service, an element to a service like collecting plastic films and wrappers, we will put out an immense campaign to make sure everybody is aware and participates to make it a success, basically. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor McPhee?
Comments. One, to say that the selection of the company Farron's, we had a presentation at the forum last week, and they're very impressive indeed. And I commend anybody to go and listen to them. It was very good. The second comment is that in Keynsham, we're already, most of us, I think it's most of us, are operating a plastic films collection which goes to Tesco's. Are you telling me that I thought that went to Swindon, but are you saying that it can't be processed in this country?
That's certainly my understanding. I think there were some trials being run at a plant in Swindon. I'm not sure it's now ongoing as a viable operation, but I will check that as well.
That's what we understood, was it was being processed in Swindon.
Yeah. I've also been led to believe that Tesco's were sending some of their plastic films and wrappers to Poland in Europe. So
right, okay.
Maybe it's both.
Anyway, we're obviously ahead of Bath in this, getting on with it. No, I just want to make I also put in a written question, and I was hoping maybe at a visit or something to go through the detailed plans with you.
Sorry, I did forget to mention that. I've been talking to the architect designers literally today, and so I'll rearrange a session with yourself and Andy and Duncan and Alistair to go through the site. But to give you some assurance, we've designed the site with accessibility and safety for residents and our staff at the forefront of our minds. So wherever we can, we've made level, areas and reduced the number of curbs where possible, but obviously in some places they do perform a safety function, but some of it is about segregation so that people are safe, but also the distinction of the move between two areas. So yeah, I'm happy to pick that up again with you.
Councillor Malloy, did you want to ask another question?
Oh, it was only just to say that other supermarkets are available, and also in Bath. That's all. That collects old wrappers and used bags.
So I just really want to say it's really good news to see that we might be able to recycle plastic films and wrappers, because they do take up the majority of space in black bags, but it's a shame it's not going to be mandatory before 2027. The Midland Road, obviously there's planning permission on there, but it's a shame that couldn't be used as a hub or a bank for recycling for residents that live in that area. And I just wanted to ask if you can explain what supplementary the curbside recycling collection will be for storage, those that's got storage issues that you put in your report.
That's the recycling banks.
Okay, right, lovely, thank you. So, okay, I think that brings us to the end of that item. And thank you. Jane, that's lovely. I think that was quite informative with that report, and I do believe at some point later in the year when all this is up and running that we may be able to do a site visit to the new recycling centre. So obviously Councillor Dave Wood's not here today to add anything to that. So that now brings us to the Clean Air Zone update, which is a presentation by Catherine Brown. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can all see the screen. And I appreciate in my report I have provided you with a lot of information relating to the first operational year of the Clean Air Zone, so I thought I'd just run through the key points for you in a quick presentation, and then I'm sure you'll have some questions. So I just wanted to go back to the whole reason why we introduced the Clean Air Zone. We did so because we have dangerous levels of nitrogen dioxide in Bath, which is, Bath is not unique in that problem, and that can have detrimental impacts to people's health. Secondly, we were mandated to achieve compliance with the legal objectives for nitrogen dioxide, and we've been issued with a number of ministerial directions to do that in the shortest time possible. And we've done that through the scheme by encouraging behaviour change. When I talk about the clean air zone, I emphasise that this is a behaviour change process. We are influencing the public to bring forward the replacement of non-compliant vehicles so we can improve the air quality in our city. And my experience over the last year is that the Clean Air Zone has created a catalyst, a platform, if you like, to have further discussions about how we can go further, not just improving air quality, but also having conversations about decarbonisation and supporting projects such as the journey to net zero. So, emphasising what we have achieved in the first year of the zone, I think we should all look back and look about how we launched a very significantly technical, complex scheme in the aftermath of a pandemic. That was not only challenging for the people who were potentially impacted by the Clean Air Zone, I'm talking about residents there and businesses as well, and we were very sensitive to that, and we introduced extra flexibility, giving people more time to get their compliant vehicles, and by extending exemptions and things like that. It was also a real challenge for the teams that introduced it. We never believed that we'd have to do it remotely through talking through numerous Zoom meetings, but we did. I'm pleased to say that the scheme is having national influence. Some of the things that we have adopted in launching our scheme is now being adopted elsewhere. So an example of that is how we had a soft enforcement period. So the first 2 months or so of the scheme, we only asked people to pay the zone entry charge rather than that and the penalty charge. And that approach has been adopted by Birmingham when they launched last June, and Portsmouth, and will be adopted by Bristol, Bradford and Sheffield, who are launching later this year and into 2023. As part of our scheme, and I guess this is the carrot bit, we created a financial assistance scheme where we gave out grants and interest-free loans to businesses and vehicle owners to upgrade their vehicles. We created a framework for that with a panel of financial providers, and that framework has now been adopted by the schemes in Bristol, also Sheffield and Newcastle, which does generate an extra income stream for the council with every transaction that's made through that framework. And finally, I go round and talk about the Clean Air Zone fairly frequently now. I did a presentation to the Air Quality Forum last week, and we are really regarded as an authority who can deliver something significant like this, and people do like to hear our learnings and our experiences that they can then use in their own local authorities. So, just honing in on the headlines of what we've managed to achieve. So we know that when we compare nitrogen dioxide levels within the zone with levels back in 2019, which was before the Clean Air Zone, we've seen a 21% reduction. Equally, we've also seen an equivalent reduction in the areas outside the Clean Air Zone, outside the boundary. So we've been able to demonstrate that we've improved air quality outside the zone as well. There are 3 sites that remain of concern for us, and those are documented in the report. They just slightly exceed the objective level, and I think you have to take in context that these were sites that historically had in excess of 60 micrograms per metre cubed levels of nitrogen dioxide. We await to hear the Joint Air Qualities Unit assessment of those sites. There is some discussion about the monitoring criteria there and whether they would be deemed within scope of their assessment, but that's being looked at now, and we should hear about that later in the autumn. Some other statistics, so we're able to see a real change in the number of a reduction in chargeable polluting vehicles coming into the zone. And we're really pleased that we've been able to enable the upgrade of over 800 vehicles through the grants that we've been provided, and we're hoping that that will reach almost 1,000 vehicles by the time that we finish. Something we took very seriously when we launched the zone was that we listened to concerns from members of the public about the potential for traffic to displace, to try and avoid going into the clean air zone, and we have done extensive monitoring around that, and Appendix 2 to the report details all of the monitoring that we have done and the locations where we have done that. I think it's fair to say that it's been difficult to draw any conclusive conclusions, if you like, from that monitoring, for the very reason that when we launched the zone, there were lots of other things going on at the same time. We were just coming out of lockdowns, and we know that there were changes in the way that people were working at that time. More people were working at home. The traffic flows that you would typically see during the day were changing. So, for example, the peak that you might see in the afternoon was diminishing. And we also know that there were more HGVs and LGVs on the roads at that time because of the move to more online home deliveries that we saw during the pandemic. In addition to that, of course, Cleveland Bridge was closed for some part of that year, which had a significant impact on the way that traffic moved around the city. So I think, in general, our monitoring continues, and we're not seeing anything significant that's saying to us that the clean air zone is causing displacement. So we're checking volumes of traffic on particular roads. We're seeing that those are remaining relatively consistent. We're also checking the compliance status of those vehicles. So we deploy temporary ANPR cameras so we can get really detailed information about whether the vehicles are compliant or not. And it's pleasing that in the most recent monitoring, we're actually seeing increases in the compliance states of vehicles on particular roads. So that's very much ongoing. A little bit about how we spend the revenue generated from the scheme. We have been at pains to say all the way through that the clean air zone is not there to generate income for the council. Our teams continue to take a very common sense, pragmatic approach to the way that we do the enforcement. The revenue from the scheme is used to pay for its operation, and any surplus that is generated must be reinvested into sustainable transport policies. So to that end, we've been able to allocate 2.5 million of surplus revenue to the WECA Fund for Sustainable Transport Improvements across the region, and that will happen over the next 2 years. So, as you can imagine, we are heavily scrutinised by the government in terms of our performance. They're very keen to see our progress. And the Central Evaluation Team in the Joint Air Quality Unit recently published a report about the first 6 months of our operation. And if you read that, there are very positive indications of how the clean air zone is having the desired effect. I was hoping, Chair, that I would be able to give you the formal JACU assessment of our progress for the first year at this meeting. Unfortunately, that has been delayed, but they have said that they recognise that local monitoring has shown that Bath is making good progress towards achieving legal compliance. The evidence is currently being assessed and independently reviewed, and they hope to have a report summarising that in the autumn. So the next steps for us, we await the outcome of that assessment. Our teams continue to embed the behaviour change that we've started. And now that we have made this progress, we very much want to think about how we can go further to improve air quality. The focus has very much been on nitrogen dioxide. There are other pollutants of concern, particularly particulate matter. And that's a pollutant of interest for us. And we very much want to share the learning from how we delivered the clean air zone to support other behaviour change projects that the council is currently doing, livable neighbourhoods being one. And we will continue to talk about our experiences and how we introduce the scheme in national forums so that others can learn from us, but more importantly, we can keep learning from them as well. So happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Johnson?
I could have asked this question in an earlier report, actually, but it's been mentioned, so it was mentioned in the first report we received about the aspects around the security in the city centre, but it's mentioned here as well about last mile delivery and cargo bike deliveries. And I remember a report to this panel which said that they were their success was almost dependent on having hubs available for larger vehicles to drop off to, so that last mile journey can be made. And I'm yet to see anything in the way of implementing that, or that certainly there's nothing really concrete in the report that suggests that, unless I've missed something. It was a long report. But I just wondered where are we with those hubs, and because I just don't think the amount of money we've been spending on the e-cargo bikes is going to be a success without them being established.
Thank you for the question. So we've been working on the e-cargo projects. Our priority in most recent months has been to develop a pilot whereby we subsidise the delivery charges for e-cargo deliveries. The idea being that we give businesses the opportunity to try it out to see if it will work for them. And then hopefully that will engender a sustainable change for them and move to e-cargo deliveries. So Claire's team has been working very hard on that with 2 suppliers that we had in the city and various businesses, and we've had some success with a local pharmacy whereby medication prescriptions have been delivered by e-cargo bikes. It's been a challenging project to deliver, and I think we're at the point where we have to review what we've done and think about how we can extend it further, because you're right, we did talk about local hubs as well. And through our conversations with businesses and suppliers, you know, there is almost a need for local deliveries, but then you have to take that one step further for the deliveries to go much more wider than that. I don't know, Claire, if there's anything you want to add?
Well, yeah, just to really echo what Kath has said, you know, we've spoken to a lot of businesses, and it feels like there's a need for a single platform where a retailer could make use of a e-cargo bike to do their local deliveries and their national deliveries. So that's a much bigger scheme than just thinking about those local deliveries, and that's kind of where we are stuck at the moment.
Slapwyard?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that I think it has been a challenging project to deliver, and I think we should recognise all the work that's gone in on that, and given the fact that it was done through the pandemic. And I know you said it was difficult to arrive at any meaningful comparison from there, but hopefully the information that we are doing now sets a level that we can still judge future behaviour on. And I suppose that really is the question, is where does it go? Because you did make the comment, when we finish. Now, I've always been of the mind that we have concentrated on the high polluting, the larger vehicles and everything like that, while recognising that maybe 40% of our cars, our domestic residential cars, aren't necessarily compliant. Now, in no way am I actually suggesting at this point that we actually look to do any action against those, but what are we doing to take the opportunity to educate people that if they are going to replace their car, they can do so and do something for the future. And my other point was that although I understand that any surpluses will be reinvested into it, I suppose I'm a little bit concerned, and I suppose it's quite parochial of me in this case, to think that that money is actually going to go into the WECA sustainable transport, where maybe it should be going into the more localised initiatives like we said, we're moving on to things like livable neighbourhoods and things like that, where they are struggling for funding in certain areas. I would have thought that's what the residents will be expected to see the benefit of it, because we've had the pain, and we've created that surplus, and it should be here in this case, not necessarily going to WECA where it gets dissipated into something that we can't see any benefit outside of other things to us.
Thank you, Councillor Appleyard. To take your first question, when I referred to my comment of when we finish, I think I was referring to the point where the ministerial directions are lifted, and we're no longer under that legal obligation. We've put an awful lot of effort into creating this scheme, and it would be great if we could evolve it and take it further. What that looks like at the moment, I don't think any of us really are sure of, but we have a commitment, as I said, to build on what we've already done. And to take your point about, whilst we don't charge cars, we take every opportunity to educate people in the interactions we have with them about how they travel around the city. Do they need to make journeys in the first place? Some of the team that have worked on the CAS are now supported the Livable Neighbourhoods project, and we'll be engaging with the residents' parking zones consultations and talking to residents about their parking permits and their choices there. So we are beginning to spread our breadth, if you like, in terms of that behaviour change, because we just don't want to stop here. We've achieved a lot, and we want to go further. Your second point about the funding, that was an example. The charging order that underpins the clean air zone states that any surplus has to be reinvested into transport schemes or other air quality schemes. Obviously, some of those WECA projects will benefit Bath and North East Somerset, and there will be other schemes that will be more local to Bath and North East Somerset, where the funding can be reinvested. So that was an example that I was given.
An element of flexibility on that decision, or is there a direction within whatever government has laid down that we've got to give preference to certain areas, or can we have a little bit more autonomy on that?
I think Chris wants to answer that question rather than me.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, just to be absolutely clear, the 2.5 million referred to in the presentation is our element of match funding that goes towards the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. So we had to find match funding locally to help bring forward all of the projects that are laid out under that paper that was presented to the board at the last meeting by Sophie Broadfield. So this is a number of different schemes that are coming forward across the area, everything from looking at the A4 corridor scheme to the A367 improvement schemes, to the city centre improvements for public transport, to livable neighbourhoods improvements, and improvements on cycle schemes. So the money from the CAS is going directly into the local area as our match funding, so we'll see the benefits of that locally.
Councillor May?
I note Councillor Appleyard's hesitation there, and I watched your body language when he asked the question. You were looking over this side of the room. Sorry. So, obviously, there has been a lot of pain behind this, and any benefits we get out of it for the community across WECA and Baines, but if we can try and push forward good schemes in Baines, then hopefully we'll go up that list. So that was just a statement, really, in terms, because that was my first question, was about how do we keep the money. The second is the figures are still over the 40 micrograms NO2. So have we got a date when we think we're actually going to achieve that? Bearing in mind that you do the survey over a full year, don't you?
That's right. So the figures that we're quoting in the report relate to the average during 2021. Obviously, we are continuing to monitor. The levels continue to come down as to a particular date when we will achieve compliance there. I can't give you a date, but it's very much moving in the right direction. We are focusing on those areas. We want them to be as low as they can possibly be, and we have some ideas about localised improvements that we can make there to try and bring those levels down further. So they're very much at the forefront of our mind to reach that 40 level.
So my next question, Chair, was very straightforward. We will achieve that soon. Should we now be setting a target of 30 to 35?
That's a very good question, and we are having discussions about that now in terms of could we introduce a local target for Bath and North East Somerset, again to demonstrate that will that we want to go further, and we will be bringing more information on that in due course.
Just the final question. I'm going to allow Councillor Appleyard to have the final question, and then we'll thank Catherine for a report.
Yeah. You mentioned on your slide there was 3 areas or 3 locations that were still of a concern, and I suppose the question is, what are those locations and how many were identified at the beginning of the process so we can understand it? And then it has opened up a slightly wider question that we are talking about Bath all the time, but I mean, what are we looking at things like your Keynsham High Streets and things like that where they have those very localised areas? Are they being brought into the conversation a little bit? And I'm not talking about Nempit Thrabwell, because I think they get 2 cars a week, but certainly Keynsham, Summer Valley, those areas that have that concentration of movement.
So to provide you some context about those sites, the sites we're talking about is at the bottom of Wells Road in Bath, Walcott Parade, and also Dorchester Street. Historically, the levels there have been in excess of 60 grams per metre cubed, averaged over a year. They're now closer to 40. So that is a significant drop that we've already achieved. I can't give you the definitive number of monitoring sites, but it's close to 100. Okay. So, you know, we've achieved an awful lot.
Oh yeah, that contextualises it very well.
So I think more councillors can request to have their areas tested, because I did for Peasdown and it was below the level, so you can put in a request for it to be done.
And to answer your second point, obviously, we look at air quality across all of Bath and North East Somerset, and we have monitoring locations across the authority. We also have other air quality management areas, so you mentioned Keynsham. Keynsham is part of an air quality management area, and we've actually been able to achieve a lot of progress there with the one-way system that has brought about a lot of benefit in terms of reducing nitrogen dioxide levels in that location. And we also have air quality management areas in Temple Cloud and Farrington Gurney. So I appreciate that whilst the clean air zone has brought focus to Bath, we very much are conscious of the rest of the authority as well.
Okay, so our meeting's nearly coming to a close, and I think Councillor Hansel just wanted to...
Yeah, I'll be very, very quick. I want to say the quality of the presentations this afternoon has been excellent, and your presentation has been absolutely brilliant, both in its thoroughness and its clarity. So thank you very much indeed. I'm a Salford councillor. There's a Salford Air Quality Management Zone. However, the figure that your tables show, the latest nitrogen dioxide figures in Salford are the lowest they've ever been. And I looked quickly at the figures for Keynsham, and they were extremely good and encouraging as well. So it's, as you pointed out, it's not just in Bath with the clean air zone, it's across the authority that there's improvement being shown. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Catherine, and your team for all your hard work. So that brings us next to the panel work plan. So at our next meeting on the 18th of July is electric vehicle charging points, local plan partial update, and that's the 2 items for next time. So, and also for the panel, just to note the items going forward. So that brings our meeting to a close. And thank you, everybody, for taking part today.